Welcome back to Inside Sources. Today, we are leading the show with a conversation with an important legal mind, Mr. Ibrahim Wali, on a few issues that have happened in the polity, such as the arrest of Mr. Sowore, the issue of freedom of information regarding what is happening in NNPC, and of course, the issue around the campaigning that has started ahead of the time. So I'd like to welcome back to Inside Sources, Mr. Ibrahim Wali, an Abuja-based legal practitioner.
Thank you so much, Mr. Laolu. It's always a pleasure to join you here to talk about all these national issues, and
very important.
Today is no different.
Thank you so much. Yes. Thank you so much. Let's start with Mr. Sowore. Of course, he was released on Friday night. I think he spent, quite a little over 48 hours or thereabout. And what interests me in that case is that besides the fact that he has claimed that the petition that was written against him, that he didn't see, they didn't show him the petition, or at some point he wasn't aware of who were the petitioners, and so he refused to give a statement. And the police authorities are saying that, well, look, you have to give a statement. We have to take your statement. That seemed to have prolonged his detention. So I wanted to get what is the legal, what's the truth about it? What's the position of the law?
Thank you for this question. When I read the communique of the Nigerian police, where they stated that his refusal to make a statement was the reason for his detention, I was set aback, because we all know, and it's in the law, Section 35, subsection 2 of the Constitution, for example, is very clear that your right to silence, or rather your right to remain silent, is guaranteed. So even if the petition was shown to Mr. Sowore, and even if he had read the petition, and obviously it is the way of the police, to hide any petition, they usually don't like communicating petitions against persons. They rather invite you in, on some veiled, statements. When you come in, they may or may not show you the petition. But even if they showed him the petition, his right to remain silent is always guaranteed. In fact, even the court cannot force anybody to speak. Where you remain silent in court, the judge has two options: either to mark it down as a malice, because, where it comes to issues where they feel like you can incriminate yourself, or an act of God. Maybe you lost your voice. But regardless, your right to remain silent is sacrosanct. The ACJ says that you have a choice to make a statement or not. But if by what I have read, which is that the allegation is borders around forgery, and if it is true, then they don't need his statement. They only need to take him to court with an active evidence. You don't need a person's statement to charge them to court. But obviously, I remember speaking on this show that there's what is known as the tyranny of confessional statements. When you don't have enough evidence, you want to coerce or force somebody into writing a statement so that you can go and use the statement. For example, the Jackson's case. Right. I'm going to use a statement against the person. Right. But if indeed they had, done their investigation and they believe that, he's at fault for all of that, they don't need his statements. But the law does not mandate anybody to write a statement to the police. So it is an aberration. It's absurd to say that his failure to write a statement is why they detained him. The law does not support that at all. At all.
Interesting, because is that kind of confusion and lack of clarity that makes people to speculate that, well, maybe they just want to punish him because he has been quite, outspoken against.
He held a protest just against, their salaries and their emoluments, and he brought in some retirees.
Exactly.
And he has been on their neck, and Nigerians should support it, basically, because he has been exposing quite a lot of undoings with regards to the police. But his right to remain silent is sacrosanct, and it shouldn't lead to any detention whatsoever.
Interesting. So what will you say about those who say, and by the way, the protest that he led about the police pension, I would say that the IGP responded, brought them in and, engaged. At least he engaged. I don't know how it ended up, but he engaged in a very reasonable way. However, it would seem that the IGP, and this is how they are, is trying to punish Sowore. Do you hold that view that this was just meant to be a punishment, just like they did for Dele Farotimi, which was what,
in fact, I believe that this is what it was, because if it wasn't a punishment, then there was no need for the police not to be transparent about it. If you have a case against a person, it helps the case for you to follow due process. It helps the integrity of the case. If you want to nail a person, you want to go to court, and you don't want to get the defense, you don't want to give the defense any option of raising any objections about due process, and you're sure you have a case, then you don't need to do all of these theatrics. But I think that it might be connected with what Sarah reporters have been reporting regarding the promotions and there's certain promotions in the police, maybe they are still speculative, but I feel like, it is connected to that. But Sowore has been involved with police issues for quite some time now. So I feel like it would, it's only smart for the police to engage him with a lot more, decorum, with a lot more civility and sense. If indeed there's a crime that he committed, you call him in, and if he refuses to write a statement, fine, you charge him to court. You should have other evidence. So there's that element without a doubt.
Exactly, and then there's the image of his hand being bandaged. It's believed that he was
tortured.
We don't know details about that.
Exactly. Yes,
I mean, what will you say about that?
I mean, you wouldn't magically just, bandage your hand. I mean, while you are in detention, you wouldn't just bandage your hand for no reason.
They have bandaged it for him.
They bandaged it for him. So, and I'm sure that since it's their facility, there must have been a reason for the bandage. So, I think that even the bandage itself, it's evidence that indeed he was. I don't know if tortured is the right word to use, because I read in the news that they were trying to transfer him from one cell to a different cell, and he resisted, and in that process, his arm got broken. But the evidence of the bandage itself, shows that indeed there was that scuffle, and the duty is on the police to ensure that people in their detention are properly taken care of. And obviously, with this type of evidence, we have no choice but to believe whatever story comes out of it.
Yeah, and I agree with you that the onus is on the police, and we continue to appeal to the Inspector General of Police, who himself is a scholar, and
police has many scholars, many legal scholars, and it's quite surprising how there's quite a lot of knowledge within the police force, but then their actions does not necessarily tally with that knowledge. But they have quite the scholars. One of my lecturers, in fact, is a police officer, and he is a PhD in law, everything. So sometimes it's so difficult to put together.
Yeah, exactly. Their scholarship and the practice. Well, let's hope for the better. We keep rooting for the Nigerian police. We want the police. We want the policemen to be well taken care of, and we also want the policemen to treat the people, the Nigerian citizens, decently and according to law. Yes. Very important. And we keep an eye on this Sowore case. But let's move on to the issue of the. In the past week, the news was all over the place that the EFCC had invited Mr. Bayo Ojulari, the GCEO of NNPC, and then, there are some reports about what happened, and the EFCC said, no, we didn't abduct him, and actually demanded, a retraction and apology from the said publication. But what is missing in my view, and that was why I wanted to ask you, is that aren't Nigerians entitled to exactly an official narration of what it is that had happened, to Mr. Ojulari, somebody that is heading that kind of an important national institution? Should his interrogation be something, that is, covered up like that, especially when there's been a scoop and the story was all over the place? Shouldn't Nigerians have the right, especially based on the freedom of information, to make a request to know exactly what happened? I wanted to ask you, being a lawyer.
Thank you. Nigerians do have a right, and based on the Freedom of Information Act of 2011, even before the act, there are a couple of constitutional provisions we can put together and say that we have a right, to have all this information. But based on the Freedom of Information Act, Nigerians don't even have to ask for this information. Institutions are mandated to actively, make this information available. Exactly. But the problem with the Freedom of Information Act is, as much as it allows a wide, discretion for citizens, to sending a request to any public institutions or private institutions who are using public money.
Right.
It also allows, especially if you look at section 12, 13, 14, and 15, certain exceptions. And the thing with exceptions is, you can always find a way to, find shelter under the exception. So, for example, one of the exceptions is law enforcement investigation.
Right.
So if the information is going to hamper their investigation, by law, they are, by the same Freedom of Information Act, they are allowed to, refuse, the disclosure of the information. But obviously, the law says that they have to give reasons for the disallowance. And if you don't agree with their position, you can now go on appeal after 30 days.
And this is when somebody has filed.
This is what you have to first of all file a Freedom of Information request. It can be orally, it can also be in writing, and they have 7 days by the law, section 1, 2, 3 of the FOI Act. They have 7 days to reply to you, to give you the information, or where they fail to give you the information, to tell you why they can't give you the information. And there are also penalties where they willfully refuse to give you any information, any public information. But like I said, there are exceptions, national security, national defense, which in my opinion is just too wide. Law enforcement investigation, personal, privacy information, like, your tax records, for example, maybe your health records, especially if you're not a public official, and, other confidentiality, positions like lawyer, client's privilege, for example. So the exceptions are quite wide in my mind. And if you look at the case of, for example, CBN and the Public and Private Development Center, they went to court because they wanted to find out, information regarding the contracts between CBN and System Tech, which are to do, or the federal government, which, are the owners of the remitter payment, network that we all use, to pay to the government. So they wanted to know, okay, who owns, the processes, who gets what, how many percent is the System Tech getting paid, what about the federal government? They wanted all the information. The CBN refused to disclose the information. They went to court. The Federal High Court agreed with PPDC that indeed, this information should be disclosed. But when they went to the Court of Appeal, CBN successfully overturned it, or the Court of Appeal overturned it under one of the exceptions, third-party confidentiality. They said that, because System Tech is a third party, they cannot give the information. So the Act gives and takes. So far, it has not achieved anything of note.
All right. But what about the issue of the statement that the EFCC issued? So People's Gazette specifically did a news report that said a few things. Number one, that the NNPC GCO was, abducted, arrested, certainly interrogated.
Forced to resign.
Forced to resign, exactly, forced to resign, and all of that. Now, EFCC has not said that there was no interrogation
at all,
but they said that there was no abduction. There was no, and that they didn't force to it. So they were very clear in their statement. Now, they are now demanding a retraction and an apology from People's Gazette. I wanted to ask you, what's your view as a lawyer? Because clearly something happened over this last week about between EFCC and the NNPC GCEO. Nobody can be hoodwinked about that anymore. Now, but the EFCC is saying that, look, you guys said that we abducted the guy, we didn't abduct the guy, you have to retract that and apologize. What's your view as a lawyer?
Well, it's very simple, right? When you do something proactively, in line with the due process, all of these things, would not surface. If the FCC had officially invited him, ensured that he came with his lawyers and everything was done on record, I don't think that anybody would go snooping around trying to find out what happened or what didn't happen. But I want to believe that People's Gazette, they have their own legal team, they have their own investigative team, and I'm sure that, I want to believe that they can defend their positions. Right, but if everything was done according to due process, we wouldn't be here. But the reality is, indeed, there's no smoke without a fire, or is it fire without a smoke? I don't know. Yes. So
there's no smoke without a fire.
Smoke without a fire, right? Yes. So something must have happened. So I feel like it behoves the FCC to make public what exactly happened. So that any speculation around any abduction or forceful resignation, can be properly eschewed. But like I said, like I know that, the parties involved, there's even Mr. Bayo himself and the FCC, I don't think they would want to come out and say for sure this is what happened or didn't happen. But yeah, I believe that for EFCC, for example, claiming for, retraction and all of that, it's very important to note that public institutions cannot be defamed. You can't go to court and say that the EFCC was defamed.
Well, I think the chairman.
But the chairman, yes. So, but if indeed, they mentioned the chairman and, they alleged that the chairman was involved in A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, and it turns out false, then he has a case against People's Gazette. But I want to believe that they have their legal team, they understand how this should not be new territory for you guys. And I'm sure you guys get sued.
Oh, of course.
Yes, but then you still have to put forth the information that you have. So, but I'm sure that there are a lot of defenses and levers for People's Gazette. I'm not holding their brief, but I don't think that the case, if it should go on, it should bother them at all.
Interesting. Yes. I mean, my own interest in the matter is that it's not right, it's not proper to conceal what it is that happened. If something of that magnitude happened, especially when EFCC has been the one that has been telling us that, look, there is serious corruption in NNPC, and the chairman went to town at the National Assembly and said that, if you see what I have seen, he went to town with that. And
NNPC, civil service, religious bodies, the chairman continues to...
And now we hear speculations that something happened with the GCO, and you are trying to hide it.
Naturally.
I mean, it raises question that, look, I mean, Mr. Chairman, where are you? Are you here or are you there?
It does.
You are the one that told us. I said that, look, we went to National Assembly. Said, the stuff that I see. And now we hear that the DMD was arrested, and mom is the word. I just felt that something is not just right about that.
Yes.
Maybe it could be political or whatever, but I felt that the public interest is better served by giving, even if a modicum of information, not to be entirely silent.
You just reminded me of something now that you mentioned public interest. So public interest is an exception to all those exceptions. The thing with law is there are exceptions and exceptions. So where even, your personal information or national security or law enforcement investigation, is put side by side with the public's interest. And even in that court, in that same CBN judgment, the court said that, the public interest would override it. Even the FOI Act, it says that public interest would always override this, but who defines public interest? And these are the issues, right? I believe that this is a matter of public interest, because if indeed the EFCC chairman is coming out and telling us that the corruption in NNPC
is mind-boggling.
So I don't think there's a need to play any hide and seek with, the Nigerians need to know. And especially, and this has not to do with just Mr. Bayo, but even the previous leadership of the NNPC, and I'm sure that they are under probe currently. So we need to know what is happening.
We need to know what is happening, especially because this fight against corruption is not a fight that we can fight with all these hide and seek kind
of. In fact, the FCC would do well for itself, to gain the legitimacy of Nigerians by being transparent about the process.
This is my point.
Yes, so it helps them to be transparent about the process.
Yeah, I mean, if we had a chairman who doesn't know what he's doing, it's a different ballgame. But this guy, seems to know what he's doing. So it's important for us to say that, sir, so why are you in today and how tomorrow?
I think my problem so far with the chairman is, the failure to separate between what he thinks and what he believes and the institutional position of the EFCC. Anytime I hear his interviews, it feels like there's that personal, he's pained by the corruption, but then the EFCC as an institution, we don't really see any seriousness in that.
Yeah, well, I'm sure that there will be a lot of issues that he will be dealing with that, can't tell the world.
Nigeria.
But we need to know,
what is happening.
Some of these basic things in modicum of information. But finally, I wanted to also ask you that the position of the law about electoral campaigning is very clear. We started talking about 2027. There are even posters
littered around,
all over the place. There's one about, right there in Asokoro, the president, holding the first lady. A very beautiful photo, by the way. Well, but they put 2027 on it already, and INEC has come out to say that, well, this is not time for that. My question to you, last question, is that, is INEC empowered to enforce that law? And what is the enforcement if INEC was to be persuaded to actually act?
In fact, INEC is the institution, wholly and fully empowered to enforce the law. It's Section 92, 93, 94, 95, 96 of the Electoral Act of 2022. But also the police, the NSCEC, they also have, the AGF, they also have the power to prosecute.
So what can they do?
It is to take you to court because the offenses
are not the fine.
No, well, I mean, obviously it's the fine, but then, the court has to decide whether indeed you fall within the, but the INEC has to look at the situation and think that, okay, indeed you are at fault, and then, take you to court or to the police or to the NSCDC who can now, take you to court. But it's spelled out in the law, but the fines, if you look at the fine, for example, I mean, if you're fining APC or the president, it's 1 million naira, 500K here.
Yeah,
and there. So
that's a joke.
So I don't think that is enough deterrence. So, but if you see it, in fact, all the positions down to the councillorship, chairmans, House of Assembly, everybody is campaigning, in the full glare of everybody. And,
even Minister Peter B is telling us that, you should vote for him because he's going to one time.
I mean, he's saying that, everybody is campaigning already, but there is this case where Falae versus Obasanjo, presidential election petition in 1999 when Obasanjo emerged on the PDP. One of their grounds was that, Obasanjo campaigned, within the 24 hours to election. The law currently is, campaign opens 150 days to elections and it closes 24 hours to the poll itself. But the court said that, they couldn't connect it to Obasanjo himself personally. So there's that plausible deniability that the law allows and says that, it is just my fans. I wasn't part of it. I didn't, Mr. President can come out and say that I didn't sanction it.
And I'm sure that he didn't have to sanction it.
But more than that, the Electoral Act is clear as to the mode of campaigns. Even outside of that, there's no religious campaigns, no campaigns in religious places, mosques, churches, no tribal or ethnic campaigns, all of these laws are there. They have their penalties, but they are being flaunted. Maybe the orientation agency are not doing enough, in terms of really communicating these laws. That is why we have taken it upon ourselves to really share these laws. Me and my team, we call it We the People. We spread it out and put it in polling units as well, because there are laws against, for INEC officials, you have to do A, B, C, D. If you fail to do it, 1 million naira fine, 6 million naira imprisonment for observers as well, for voters, for party officials. The Electoral Act, tries to cover all of these things, but it seems, these parts are, dumbed down for the more
subsumed.
Yeah, so we've taken it upon ourselves to really aggressively communicate these things.
Excellent work, and excellent comment as always. Thank you so much, Mr. Ibrahim Wali.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you for your insights. Thank you for your contribution.
It's my pleasure.
And thank you for always coming to Inside Sources when we need your insight.
I'm always available. Thank you, sir.
All right.
Thank you. God bless you.
Thank you so much.
Yes, sir.